Objection. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida. 5 minutes.
February 8th, the White House. Question, Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The President, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yes, it's a lie. It's just what regular people would say, right? Yeah, all right. So the next one. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. That wasn't true either, was it?
That was inconsistent with the findings of our investigation.
Another lie, people might say, right? Because what you put in your report was among the places Mr. Biden's lawyers found classified documents in the garage was a damaged open box. So here's what I'm understanding, right? As Mr. Armstrong laid out, you find in your report that the elements of a federal criminal violation are met. But then you apply this senile cooperator theory that because Joe Biden cooperated and the elevator doesn't go to the top floor, you don't think you get a conviction. And I actually think you get to the right answer in that. I don't think Biden should have been charged. Don't think Trump should have been charged. But under the senile cooperator theory, isn't it frustrating that Biden continues to go out and lie about the basic facts of the report that lay out a federal criminal violation?
Congressman, I need to disagree with at least one thing that you said, which is that I found that all of the elements were met. One of the elements of the relevant mishandling statute is the intent element, and what my report reflects is my judgment that based on the evidence, I would not be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury that that intent element had been met.
Right, but the reason you have that doubt is the senile cooperator theory. The fact that Joe Biden is so inept in responding that you can't prove the intent, which again, I don't quibble with that conclusion, but it's frustrating to be like, oh, well, this guy's not getting treated the same way as Trump because the elevator's not going to the top floor, so we can't prove intent. While at the same time, Biden goes out there at the White House and says, well, you know, he just blatantly lies. And what I'm trying to figure out is whether or not Biden's lying because he's still so senile, he hasn't read your report, or whether it's a little craftier and a little more devious and perhaps a little more intentional than we might otherwise think. So I also want to go to this Biden Penn Center. Like, did it give concern to you that the Biden Penn Center, where all this classified stuff was being mishandled, was being floated by foreign governments?
Congressman, we were concerned with getting to the bottom of all of the classified documents that were recovered during the course of our...
Yeah, but what bothers me is that the money that was paying for the place where the documents were being inappropriately held, it was the Chinese and it was other foreign countries. Did that play into your analysis? Did you look into the $1 billion in foreign funding sources at the Biden Center at UPenn, for example?
Congressman, we conducted a thorough, impartial, and fair investigation, and we were very, very concerned with getting to the bottom of all the relevant questions relating to the recovered documents.
Did you look into the fact that the Chinese were floating the place where this guy was keeping the documents unsecure? Yes or no?
Congressman, to the extent that we identified evidence that was relevant and significant to our investigation, we put it in our report.
Okay, well, it seemed relevant to me, maybe not to you. Another thing that seemed relevant to me is this ghostwriter, right? So the ghostwriter purposefully deletes this evidence that seems to be show culpability of Biden's crimes, and you don't charge him. Why did you not charge the ghostwriter with obstructing justice and deleting evidence?
Well, for a number of reasons that are laid out in the report, but in brief, Congressman, yes, when we interviewed the ghostwriter, he did tell us, and I'm trying to get the exact language, that one of the things on his mind, one of the things he was aware of, was that I had been appointed special counsel and was conducting an investigation.
Right, so he didn't, just so everybody knows, the ghostwriter didn't delete the recordings just as a matter of happenstance. Ghostwriter has recordings of Biden making admissions of crimes. He then learns that you've been appointed. He then deletes the information that is the evidence, and you don't charge him.
That is reflected in the report, and one of the reasons...
What does somebody have to do to get charged with obstruction of justice by you? If deleting the evidence of crimes doesn't count, what would meet the standard?
So, Congressman, as we state in the relevant chapter of the report, one of the things that Mr. Zwanitzer did not delete was transcripts of the recordings that he had created that included inculpatory evidence relating to Mr. Biden.
Oh, so if you destroy some evidence but not other evidence, that somehow absolves you of the evidence you destroy? Here's what I see. Zwanigers should have been charged, wasn't. Biden and Trump should have been treated equally. They weren't. And that is the double standard that I think a lot of Americans are concerned about. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hurth, thank you for being here. A little confused about this hearing. Mr. Raskin laid out the big picture, what we should be concerned about, but in the more limited picture, Director Mueller had an investigation. He's our most famous recent special prosecutor, and he found sufficient evidence to say there was a connection between Russia and the Trump campaign. But it supported a criminal prosecution if he were not president. You found there was no evidence to support a criminal prosecution. And the story here is simple. President Biden identified classified documents in his home and other places and told archives about them. The Independent Department of Justice under Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed you, a former Trump political appointee, as special counsel to fully investigate these circumstances and authorized you to prosecute criminal misconduct. You declined to prosecute because you found insufficient evidence of a crime. Case closed. It makes really a perfect case where you did your job, Mr. Garland did his job, and unlike Mr. Barr, he didn't interfere. Did Mr. Garland ask you to change your report at all?
He did not, sir.
Didn't redact a thing?
No, sir.
Like Mr. Barr did, he redacted everything and made the Mueller report look like 180 degrees different than what it was. Mr. Garland did right, and you did right, and I commend each of you. The Department of Justice is independent and allows the special counsels to investigate and prosecute the facts if it's supported. Joe Biden's actions in handling of classified materials is similar to most other former presidents and vice presidents. The exception is Donald Trump. So let's start with some yes or no questions. Did you receive any pressure from Mr. Garland or his staff to make any specific factual finding or legal conclusion?
No.
Did you receive the resources necessary to carry out your duties?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to believe that you were treated differently with regard to independence or resources than other DOJ special prosecutors?
No.
Based on your experience as special counsel, do you have any reason to believe the Attorney General was improperly directing, pressuring, or interfering with Jack Smith or his work?
I do not have the basis to answer that question.
But your declination, which we treat as thoughtful and apolitical, we should treat prosecutorial decisions by Jack Smith the same way, to the best of your knowledge.
Again, I really do not have the sufficient information with respect to Jack Smith's investigation to provide any comment on it.
Let me ask you this. If President Biden, in his testimony to you, knew the exact date, January 20, whatever it was, 2009, when he became vice president, and the day when he left being vice president, January the 20th, I guess the first would have been January 20th again, 2009, and then January 20 in 2017. If he knew those dates exactly right, and if he knew the exact date and the instant that Beau Biden died, would that have changed your decision to not to bring a prosecution?
Sir, I cannot engage in hypotheticals about what my decision would have been with different facts. What I did was to make a decision based on the facts and the circumstances that I was presented with, and we did identify during our investigation.
But it appears to me, and I think it would appear to the American public, that these minor discrepancies, as far as dates after a long period of time, was not the basis. It was not the basis for your decision to decline to prosecute. It was the fact that you didn't have the facts, that he acted differently than Trump, that he voluntarily provided the documents, that he complied with the Justice Department, that he didn't try to obstruct justice. Those were the reasons you didn't prosecute him, not because he missed a few dates.
Congressman, my reasons for my declination decision are set out in my report, and I stand by the words in the report, sir.
Well, thank you. And I think I'm encompassing them in my what I'm saying to you is that there was not anything to do with his memory why he wasn't chosen to be, you chose not to indict him. It was the difference in the facts in the case and how he dealt with it. The fact is, Mr. Biden sat through 5 hours, and he did an admirable job. And he did an outstanding job in the State of the Union, laying out the case for the future of America, for the middle class, for democracy around the world, for standing up to the Russians, not bending down to them. That's what's important. Not if you can be like on the $64,000 question, assuming it was legit, and answering every single question correctly. That's not what you need to be president. To be president, you need to have values. You need to have an understanding of what values America has and needs to maintain to keep the world safe and peaceful. That's dealing with Ukraine. That's dealing with difficult people like Netanyahu in Israel to try to get something done that's correct. That's what Joe Biden does. And understanding Social Security and Medicaid are important institutions that help seniors, and not senile people. I mean, I really object to that comment. People say nobody suggests he's senile, and that's disrespectful of senior people with any kind of memory disability. Lots of seniors have memory disability, but they're not senile, and to do such was shameful. Joe Biden is a competent, good president who knows American values.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hur, I'd like to start off by thanking you for a year of hard work and a comprehensive report. I'm going to try not to provide testimony, as some people on both sides are, or provide conclusions, but I do have some questions that lead me to ask you for conclusions. One question is, were there notes of the President of the United States that dated back to when he was a senator that contained classified information?
Among the documents that were recovered during our investigation were marked classified documents that dated back to when Mr. Biden was a senator.
When he was in his 30s, 40s, 50s?
I believe that's correct.
And were there documents from the time that he was vice president?
Yes.
Okay. So there's been a lot to do about, senility, non-senility, poor memory, and so on. But let's just go through something that you deal with as a prosecutor every day. You first start off with a set of initial evidence that indicates there may have been a crime. Is that right? By the time it gets to you, usually you have some evidence that there may have been a crime.
I think that is fair, yes.
Okay. And in this case, at some point during this investigation where the elements of the crime, including willfulness, were put before you and you reached a personal conclusion that either there was likely guilt or not. Is that correct? Not provable, not in front of a jury, just personal, because you have to make that decision as part of the case, correct?
Correct. And I would say I approach the task as I have been trained to as a prosecutor, which is as on an iterative basis. The investigation is always uncovering new evidence that you incorporate.
Right. So both before, during, and at the end, did you reach a conclusion, notwithstanding his current mental state of being an elderly man with a poor memory and so on, that he did in fact deliberately take documents and held them from back when he was a senator, and we're talking about your personal, not that you could prove it, but personally, did you see a pattern that goes all the way back to him being a senator of taking documents, making notes, and taking them and holding them personally?
Congressman, I viewed my task as a prosecutor in this matter to determine what I believed the evidence.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to take away from your conclusion. Some others are debating the conclusion. I'm not debating the conclusion. I just want to go through one element that I think is important. Look, you've prosecuted people in the past and failed to get a conviction. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, you're not a 1,000 perfect batting average. Okay.
I can't say that.
Yeah. So you went into cases thinking that you would succeed and you didn't. One might say you probably declined to prosecute ones that you might have either gotten a conviction or gotten a plea on. Would you say that's fair to say over your long career?
I think that's fair because I take the rules as set forth in the Justice Manual seriously.
However, I'm going to presume that you would never prosecute someone you thought was outright innocent.
Correct.
In this case, did you reach a conclusion that this man was outright innocent?
That conclusion is not reflected in my report, sir.
Right. So you did not reach that conclusion, or it would have been in your report.
I viewed my task of explaining my decision to the Attorney General as being based on my judgment and my assessment of the evidence. Would a conviction at trial be the probable outcome? And that's
and I just want to make sure the record is complete in that, because I think it's extremely important. You did not reach an idea that he had committed no wrong. You reached a conclusion that you would not prevail at trial and therefore did not take it forward. Is that correct?
Correct, Congressman.
Okay. I just want to go through one or two little, these are housekeeping almost. The documents that the president, then vice president, took, which included his own notes, to your knowledge, aren't those covered by the Freedom of Information Act? Potentially.
I honestly do not know, Congressman.
Aren't they covered by the Presidential Records Act, as every note and every text of the president, the vice president, and members of the cabinet are covered?
I think different folks would have different views on whether they're covered by the PRA, Congressman.
But isn't it true that he left office leaving no copies of that behind, and that alone was inconsistent with an open and transparent individual, correct?
I'm not aware of copies of those materials being left behind, Congressman.
Okay, I want to thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for the extra few seconds. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hur, you've led a distinguished career, earning your law degree from Stanford University, and you served as a student as executive editor of the Stanford Law Review, correct?
Correct.
Then you went on to clerk for Judge Kaczynski of the Ninth Circuit, correct?
Yes, sir.
After that, you ascended to a clerkship with then Chief Justice William Rehnquist on the United States Supreme Court, correct?
Correct.
And then you later joined the Daddy Bush Department of Justice as a special assistant to known Federalist Society member and now FBI Director Christopher Wray. Isn't that correct?
I did spend some time working for former Assistant Attorney General Christopher Wray.
And you later joined the Trump Justice Department as the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, working as the right-hand man for another known Federalist Society member, Rod Rosenstein. Isn't that correct?
I served as Mr. Rosenstein's principal deputy.
And then Donald Trump appointed you to serve as U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland. Is that correct?
President Trump nominated me to serve in that position, and I was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate.
That's correct. And thereafter, Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed you to serve as special counsel for the United States Department of Justice to conduct a full and thorough investigation of certain matters to determine whether or not Joseph Biden should be charged with unlawfully removing and retaining classified documents. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And nowhere in that order does Attorney General Garland authorize you to conduct an investigation and issue a report on whether President Biden is mentally fit to serve as president. Isn't that correct?
That does not appear in the appointment order.
And pursuant to your appointment to conclude your investigation, you issued a report that was published by Attorney General Garland, correct?
He made it available to Congress, sir.
And your report concluded that after a full and thorough investigation, the evidence was insufficient to establish that President Biden had willfully retained classified documents. Isn't that correct?
My judgment was that based on the state of the evidence, a conviction at trial was not the probable outcome.
And you determined that there was no evidence of willful retention because each time classified documents were discovered to be in the president's possession, the White House notified the National Archives right away. The Biden legal team and the White House fully cooperated with the National Archives during the investigation. Once the DOJ opened the investigation, President Biden and his personal counsel fully cooperated. Isn't that correct?
We did identify some evidence of willful retention and disclosure, but we also
the point
noted
is, though, that the president cooperated fully with you. And didn't they never tried to hide any documents from you, did they?
The report does note steps of cooperation taken by the president.
Thank you, sir. And last but not least, unlike in the Trump classified documents case, President Biden's counsel never falsely certified that there was no classified documents in the president's possession, correct?
The report does include some comparisons and contrasts between the facts alleged in the Trump case and the Biden case.
Despite clearing President Biden from being prosecuted, you used your report to trash and smear President Biden because he said in response to questions over a 5-hour interview that he didn't recall how he got the documents. And you knew that that would play into the Republicans' narrative that the president is unfit fit for office because he's senile. And the American people saw during the State of the Union address that that was not true. But yet that's what you tried to offer to them, and that's why they are having you here today, so that they can expand upon that narrative. And you knew that that's what was going to happen, didn't you?
Congressman, I reject the suggestions that you have just made. That is not what happened.
Let me move on.
Partisan politics play no part whatsoever in my work.
You are a member of the Federalist Society, are you not?
And fair.
Are you a member of the Federalist Society?
I am not a member of the Federalist Society.
But you are a Republican, though, aren't you?
I am a registered Republican.
Yes, sir. And you're doing everything you can do to get President Trump reelected so that you can get appointed as a federal judge or perhaps to another position in the Department of Justice. Isn't that correct?
Congressman, I have no such aspirations, I can assure you, and I can tell you that partisan politics had no place whatsoever in my work. It had no place in the investigative steps that I took. It had no place in the decision that I made, and it had no place in a single word of my report.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hur, thank you for being here. You know, I think for the folks that may be watching this at home, they might be a little bit confused, and I'm trying to organize this in my mind as well. The way the president is portrayed in your report and just how we feel about him. Was he a well-meaning, forgetful man, as you said? Or was he a man that was focused on history? Was he a man that maintained and retained these top secret documents that should have been not in his home? And was he a man that wanted to prove he was worthy to be president and that his vision of Afghanistan was better than even President Barack Obama's, and that his focus on history was most important to him? Do you know which it is?
Congressman, to the extent you're quoting language from my report, I stand by the words in my report.
So you stand by that he was, and let me quote you exactly, quote, a well-meaning but forgetful old man.
I don't think those exact words appear in the report, Congressman, but to the extent that I use words similar to that effect in my assessment of how a jury would perceive Mr. Biden and the evidence relating to him, including his testimony, I do stand by that assessment.
So is it accurate to say that in your interview, President Biden retained and disclosed classified materials as a means to bolster his image as a presidential figure? And I'm asking you for yes or no's here because our time is so limited.
I believe words to that effect are in my report,
So
Congressman.
the answer is yes. Would you agree that President Biden's intent to showcase his legacy provides a motive for his actions concerning classified materials? Yes or no?
It is one of the motives addressed in the report.
Yep, to showcase his legacy. Is it accurate to quote your report that classified documents were found in, quote, badly damaged boxes in his garage near a collapsed dog crate, a dog bed, a Zappos box, and an empty bucket? Is that correct?
Those words do appear in the report.
So that's correct. The answer is yes. Are these secure locations to store classified documents?
They are not.
Okay, so we got a former vice president who is established to have willfully, purposefully retained classified documents in order to highlight his political stature and show his stature as a presidential figure. We have a former vice president who stored classified documents in very unsecured places. We have a former vice president who will not suffer any consequences for all of these actions, all because we say, well, he's a well-meaning, forgetful old man. You know, if you were kind of a well-meaning, forgetful old man that was driving a car and you forgot what you were doing a little bit and you hit somebody and killed them, I believe you'd be responsible. The law must apply, you know this, to everyone. The standard behind the decision not to prosecute Joe Biden, especially in light of Special Counsel Jack Smith's decision to prosecute President Trump for similar conduct, gives the real appearance of two standards. Just again, so much part of this Department of Justice. Justice for thee, but not for me. Special Counsel Hur, has any former president or vice president besides President Trump ever been criminally charged for knowingly retaining classified information after they left office? Yes or no?
No.
Would you concur that Special Counsel Smith's decision to charge a former president for retaining and disclosing classified information was an extraordinary, unusual, and unprecedented decision?
I will not comment on that matter.
Well, I'm going to comment. The answer is yes. Special Counsel Hurd, these two reports are the culmination, in my mind, of the Department of Justice's two standards, and an example, again, of the Justice Department being weaponized against conservatives. You know, there's another piece to this, too. I have just a few seconds. We know that when his ghostwriter was speaking to him, he also did recordings, and when he did those recordings, it was clear. In fact, I'll try to quote this here. It was a month in 2017, a month after Biden left as VP. He was aware of top secret classified materials that were, quote, downstairs. Is that true?
That is reflected in an audio recording, yes.
It's reflected in an audio record, you know. So sometimes he may be sleepy, sometimes he may be forgetful, sometimes he may be cognitively impaired. There's no doubt about that. But man, when it came to his personal legacy, the way he wanted to be remembered, to be sure that he was a big deal, in plain English, in the future, he was willingly and knowingly breaking the law. And it's unfortunate that we have a Department of Justice that will treat one person one way and somebody else a different way. It's a sad day for America. Thank you, Mr. Hurd.